Congratulations to the St. Louis Blues, your 2019 Stanley Cup champions. And there was really no doubt in this one once they got rolling. But the credit, a lot of that goes to that number 50, that goaltender for them, JB. And, it all comes back to I've noticed a lot of disrespect towards Binnington after a loss. He's fantastic after a loss. He was fantastic after the loss in Game 6 as well. Do I expect him to get respect? Probably not. He doesn't end up getting the Conn Smythe, but we'll get to that. Now, Clifton was out. Grzelcyk was in. I thought Grzelcyk had a good game. Edmondson was in. Bortuzzo out. He was fine. Barbashev in. I didn't think that made a big difference either. This was Chara's 14th Game 7 in his career, which passes Patrick Roy and Scott Stevens on that list. And it was the first Game 7 of a Stanley Cup final ever in Boston. And it's one that Bruins fans may end up wanting to forget. Let's be honest. They may end up wanting to forget this one. Early Blues pressure, that first shift. I was all Blues early, and I put on the board, don't look nervous. The Blues didn't look nervous early, which has been the whole theme, right? The whole, Blues don't belong here. They don't have the experience. Experience in a game like this, I kind of, it's fine to have it, but it doesn't rule out bad things happening to the team with more experience. Now, the Bruins got their first shot at 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Jordan Binnington, that had a huge save at 3 minutes and 49 seconds. And this is the storyline that would haunt the Bruins. Jordan Binnington came to play tonight. The shots were 2-1 for Boston at 5 minutes. But Boston had control of the puck far more than St. Louis at that point. And there were lots of almost for Boston. I could go through all of these moments when they almost scored. This was close, that was close. And whether it was a deflection, whether it was Binnington making a remarkable save, or just Boston not being able to bury it, everything seemed to be working against Boston early. Parayko got a delay of game penalty. You can frame that one because that's the only penalty that would exist in this game. That's it. That's the only penalty. So nothing was called on either team in the entire game. I thought they played relatively clean as well. There were certainly things you could have called on either team in this game, but the referees said we're letting them solve it. A solid penalty kill by the Blues and Binnington, even though Boston had the chances. And the Bruins were up 6-1 in shots 10 minutes into the game. So at 10 minutes, it's 6-1 for Boston in shots. But I always get nervous. I always have this opinion that, when your goalie isn't facing any shots, that's not a good thing. And certainly that appears to have been the case. Binnington robs Johansson 11 minutes and 30 seconds. Because, see, while your goalie isn't seeing the puck, the other team's goalie is. And odds are he's getting pretty confident with the puck. So Binnington was getting more and more confident, even though for over 12 minutes, the Blues didn't have a shot. Nothing. They weren't getting in the Bruins zone, nothing. And it looked like, Boston could run them out of the rink, except for one problem. Jordan Binnington. The game slowed down, but there were still no shots from the Blues until just shortly before Ryan O'Reilly gets a goal. Bouwmeester and Pete Pietrangelo with the assists. That's the first goal in the game, and coming into tonight, first goal in Game 7s and Stanley Cup Finals. You're 11-5. So I knew that was big, and that was after going 16 minutes with no shots, none. So Rask finally faces one from O'Reilly, and the O'Reilly shot was a deflection. I'm not going to put that on Rask. It's a deflection. It's the kind of goal that makes a goaltender look bad, but it's that the puck changes direction. Much the same as that bounce goal that went in past Binnington in the last game that everybody talked about. The crowd was kind of quiet after that, I thought, and the goal was only on the third shot of the period. Boston had outshot St. Louis badly. Doesn't matter. It's only the pucks that go in the net that matter. The Blues were playing 5 players back as soon as they got that 1-0 lead. They went, all right, now we play our game. They go into that 4-man box, one person forechecking. This is the first case I can think of where a team has legitimately trapped their way to the Stanley Cup. The St. Louis Blues played the trap the whole playoffs, and they showed that it can still work. It's not the same as the trap that was employed by the New Jersey Devils. It allows more shots than did that trap, but you know what? It still was successful. 8 seconds to go in the playoffs, your backbreaker takes place. or 8 seconds ago in the first period, I should say. Pietrangelo scores from Schwartz in the most important game in their careers, and that makes it 2-0 with 8 seconds left in the period. So, of course, we go into the second with St. Louis up 2-0, and you start getting into the gaudy numbers of how well St. Louis plays when they have a lead in this playoffs. And it was a quiet crowd to start the second period. You could tell it was a nervous energy. There were some "Let's Go Bruins" chants for sure, but they weren't nearly as loud as at the start of the game. The Blues were boxing the Bruins out. So while the Bruins still controlled the shot clock, they outshot them 12-4 in the first. A lot of those shots started being a little bit more periphery. The first period, there were a lot of really good prime scoring opportunities for Boston. Second period, it felt like those opportunities were a little more desperate. Not quite as solid, and St. Louis was playing that road game that they've been playing these whole playoffs. I warned people. The Blues get their first shot at 5 minutes and 8 seconds into that second period. That's right. They're still not generating shots, but they're up 2-0. So all the pressure is on Boston. Perfect road game by the Blues so far, despite the reality that in 21 minutes of that first half of the game, they had 0 shots. Bupkis, nothing, 0. It was increasing pressure on the Bruins, and you could see it. You could see that Marchand, who at points in these playoffs has driven me nuts with how he tries to go through everybody by himself. He was doing that in this as well. Pasta had some moments where he took some shots that, take an extra second, but they were really starting to worry me. Tuukka then commits robbery at about the 10-minute mark, where I don't know how he kept the puck from going in, but you know what? He spins around and he does his spinorama in the net, and he knocks the puck out. He did it in Game 6, and he did it again in this one. And you knew that if that goal had gone in, this game was over. But I already kind of felt like it was. For those who watched the live stream, I had no illusions going into the second period that Boston was going to come back and win this. I've watched this game for St. Louis in the entire playoffs. This is the game that scared me going into this series. This is why I wanted San Jose, not these guys. The passes weren't working for the Bruins now. So in the first period, there was a lot of good passes. They weren't getting the looks. Now they're not even getting the passes across. The Blues were breaking a lot up. The shots were 4-3 for St. Louis at 12 minutes. And then Boston started getting some shots through, even though it felt like it was a really sleepy second period, which favors the Blues. They will take a quick period, virtually no whistles, no penalties, no power plays, no problem. Just make this game go as fast as possible, and it really kind of did. Binnington was dialed in, so when Boston got those opportunities late in the second period, Jordan Binnington wasn't allowing anything. And I could go into just how fantastic his goaltending was, but I think the fact that he saved 23 out of 23 in the first 2 periods, this kid's for real. There was no puck luck for Boston at all. So the plays where you might have seen a bounce go their way, where you might have seen something go off of a ref and then it goes in, these kinds of things that we've seen in the playoffs, Boston had none of that tonight. So it's 2-0 going into the third, and really Boston was up against it because they were against a goaltender that wasn't intending to allow anything. Great save by Binnington at 1 minute and 6 seconds, which really felt important because everything in this game felt important. The Blues were breaking up passes in that third period even more than in the second, and definitely more than in the first, when it looked like they were reeling, and this game could have been 3-0 Boston, but Binnington was fantastic. There were 4 Blues back in a box on every play. So there's 4 Blues back every single play. And as a fan of the Bruins, frustrating. Really frustrating. But I watched them against Winnipeg. I watched them against the Dallas Stars. And I watched them against San Jose. This is how St. Louis plays. This is what they did every series. The Blues were also blocking a ton of those shots. So when the Bruins did get the shots, that box helped to protect that puck and keep it from getting through to Binnington. It really looked like a Blues game. I had to write that up here because it really did. This is as St. Louis a game as you're going to see in these playoffs. Then Shen scores from Tarasenko and Schwartz, which felt like, much like the O'Reilly goal in the first, it kind of came against the flow of the play. And that's your game right there. Sanford then adds another from Perron and O'Reilly. So O'Reilly with a goal and an assist in this game. He's a huge story. So for Sabres fans everywhere, this is a wake-up call. I remember going into this year. When the O'Reilly deal took place, and Buffalo fans were like, oh, O'Reilly's an anchor. And when St. Louis was down at the bottom of the standings early January, there was a lot of talk about that's what O'Reilly does. He sinks teams. This is what he is. No. They pulled the goalie with 3 minutes and 45 seconds left because the Bruins didn't really have any other choice. You're down 4-0. You don't have much choice. Grzelcyk then scores a nice one bar down assist from Krejci, and that makes it 4-1. And that's your final. Your Stanley Cup champions are the St. Louis Blues. Binnington saved 32 out of 33. Both teams had 10 shots in that third period. Rask saved 16 out of 20. If you focus on that score line, that stat line, and you say, oh, that's not good enough, you know what? Rask had a fantastic Stanley Cup Finals. He had a fantastic playoffs in general. Binnington has been underrated throughout the playoffs. Remember, you look nervous in Winnipeg. Everybody was all talking about how great Bishop was in Dallas. There were points against San Jose where, he didn't look great. Game 1 against San Jose, for instance, it was, he's playing a real team now. He's not very good. And, of course, twice in this series, Binnington looked like he was human. And in this game, 32 saves on 33 shots proves he may very well not be human. The Conn Smythe goes to Ryan O'Reilly. So, again, it comes back to that conversation about O'Reilly and the reputation he had coming into this season. And you know what? He fought back against that reputation, and he absolutely deserved it. There are so many great stories in this. Layla being brought in by the Blues to witness this. She looked absolutely elated after the game. Pat Maroon, who comes home and signs on the cheap, signed for less money and for less term in St. Louis than he was offered elsewhere. And he gets to win a Stanley Cup for his hometown team. Boston gets 1 power play. St. Louis gets 0. And that's it. Special teams play absolutely no role in this. St. Louis equals the record of 10 wins on the road, and they are the first team to finish with a below 500 record at home and still win in the playoffs. So hopefully, for Blues fans that went and saw them lose in Game 6, hopefully this makes you feel better overall. St. Louis wins it in 7, and it's a long time coming. This is a franchise that has really been overdue for a Stanley Cup since I was in high school. I remember teams with McInnes, with Grant Fuhr, teams that had Hall, Oates, and some really fantastic Hall of Fame level players, and they just couldn't get over that hump in the playoffs. This is a far more workmanlike group. The biggest star you could argue in St. Louis is probably Tarasenko. He was virtually invisible in this game, and he was virtually invisible for large portions of the playoffs, not just the Stanley Cup final. So you can look at his goals and say, well, he had 11 goals. True, but a lot of those are in a few games here and there, and his overall game wasn't fantastic. St. Louis, they did it with all 12 forwards, all 6 defensemen, and most importantly, Binnington, when they win games, his save percentage around .950 in these playoffs. This is an absolutely stellar goaltender in these playoffs, and I would have voted him for Conn Smythe myself if I had a vote, but Ryan O'Reilly, that makes sense as well. So there you go. St. Louis Blues win the last game of the season, and starting tomorrow, I will dissect what St. Louis and Boston need to do going forward in that series that I've done every other team on except those two, of course, because they were still playing. And then we get into the draft, we get into free agency, and we get into all that other wonderful stuff, including the award show a week from tonight. So there you go. Again, congratulations to the St. Louis Blues. Long overdue that you guys get a Stanley Cup. And to the Boston Bruins, I could not be prouder as a Boston Bruins fan. Fantastic season. Did not end the way that I wanted it to, but I've mentioned this before. I've watched the Stanley Cup playoffs every year since 1982, and I have been happy about who won the game in 1999. And that's it. I have never seen a team that I'm actively cheering for in the Stanley Cup Finals win that last game and get that exuberant moment. So for Blues fans that are feeling that right now, congratulations. It must feel great. I really don't remember. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video, and hey, it was a great season. And now we get set up for 2019-2020. As soon as this is done, that means we start looking at trades, free agents, all that other wonderful stuff immediately. It gets crazy. Thank you guys for all your support. Hit like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you again soon.